This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I was doing a podcast with Jake Burns, and he brought up to me that every year there are just players that regress, right? It's part of the reason why I don't love doing the schedule game, because right now we're looking as if every player is going to reach every expectation that anybody's ever had for them, and that they're going to be at healthiest and everything else. But like, things just happen. Players regress. Some guys have bad years. Some guys have off seasons. Some guys just don't get to their full potential. And that got me thinking, well, if that happens every year virtually to every team, then who are the guys on the Cleveland Browns that I feel like have shown enough signs over the last couple of years for me to be just a little bit concerned about? And well, I got three names here for you. Three guys that I feel like there might be ripe enough conditions available for them that might lead to a bit of a disappointing season, or at least a season well under expectation. Now, I want to be clear before I get into this that I'm not hoping that any of these players have down seasons. I'm not necessarily even predicting that these guys are going to have bad seasons. I'm just looking at what they've done the last few years and pointing out some trends that might be a little bit concerning. So let's get into it. But before we do, we're at 29 members. We just need one more to get to 30. We get to 30, exclusive live stream for the members and Patreon. So make sure you join the membership and show off your badges, show off your new emojis. I appreciate y'all so much. Now let's get into the rest of the video. So who is the first guy that I have pegged for potentially being a little bit of a disappointment? And this one, I don't think is going to surprise many people. Jack Conklin is the first guy I'm going to put up here. Now, I don't know if I would full bore bet on this. Like, I think Jack Conklin, of all the three guys I'm mentioning, might be, I would say he's probably the second most likely to have a down year. The reasons I think this are simple. One, he's had a pretty concerning injury history. He's not been somebody who has played very many full seasons for the Cleveland Browns. If he has played the majority of the game, it's almost certainly while playing through some kind of injury, and he hasn't really been the best while playing through injury. And I know playing through injury, it's one of those things that we give a break for a lot of the other positions, but offensive line is just not the case. We usually don't give offensive linemen breaks for playing through injuries because that's kind of the nature of the job. You have to be good at playing through injuries, and he just isn't, for whatever reason. You look at his PFF grades, they have taken a very concerning dip over the last couple of years. He had an 84 grade in 2020. That dropped to a 78 grade in 2021, all the way down to a 66.7 grade. And where I'm more concerned is with his ineffectiveness as a run blocker. You can see this on the tape. The PFF grade reflects this, but he's basically gone from an elite run blocker the last couple of years to, well, in 2021 and 2020 to in 2022 being absolutely mediocre. It's a bit of a concern. Not being able to stay healthy, not really playing up to what we expected him to be. All those things are concerns. And yes, the Browns did give him an extension because they believe in him more than they believe in a James Hudson. But they also drafted DeJuan Jones, which tells me that they wouldn't be surprised if they needed to make an upgrade in this area sometime soon. So that's why I have Jack Conklin on this list. The next guy I want to talk about is Wyatt Teller. And this is the guy who Jake Burns brought up. And I never really thought about it until he brought it up. And then I started to think about it. And then I started to get a little concerned. Now, the main point that Jake brings up is since that run he had in 2020, he's been a very inconsistent player, Wyatt Teller. And that's true. You look at his PFF grades, he has had a lot of below 70 performances. I think like 11 last year and 8 the year before. He has these games where he plays elite, but what he might end up being is being a very streaky player. And again, we don't think of streaky players as offensive linemen, but if a wide receiver can be streaky, if a tight end can be streaky, if a defensive end can be a streaky player, why not an offensive lineman? And I think that's what we have in Wyatt Teller. He had the one great year in 2020. He's not really even come close to touching that year since then. And what's even more concerning is it'd be one thing if he had like a 92 grade in 2020 and then he kind of plateaued out at like 85. But he's had that 92 grade, and every year after that, the grades have gotten lower and lower and lower with Wyatt Teller. The injury stuff affected him last year. I'm pretty sure there was some excuse for him not playing as well the year before. But at some point, we have to start to ask, was 2020 kind of a blimp for Wyatt Teller, or was that a start of what he's going to be for the rest of his career? Because I think he's been resting on the reputation that he built up in 2020 for the last couple of years. And this more so than right tackle concerns me. The reason Jack Conklin doesn't concern me is because I think the Browns have multiple avenues to get decent right tackle play. If Jack Conklin is not playable or is not playing well enough to justify putting him out there, or if he gets hurt. There just are more options. You have DeJuan Jones, you have James Hudson, you have more options there. At guard, no options really to replace Wyatt Teller, right? We have Joe Bitonio and we have Wyatt Teller, and that's about it, right? And I worry that if Wyatt Teller's not playing well, if Joe Bitonio's not out there, what happens to our center position? Because Ethan Posick is another guy who I thought played well because of the help around him mostly. And if he gets stuck out there without that help, what does he become? You see how this all becomes a bunch of dominoes that could fall? The offensive line does not concern me as in I think they're badly constructed or I think they're bad. What concerns me about the offensive line is that there's a reputation that they're living up to that I don't know if they're quite tasked to living up to yet. We'll see during the season. I'm not saying I think this offensive line is bad, but I am saying that there's reason to be concerned and to pay close attention to the offensive line throughout the beginning of the year, because there are some things there that just are a little bit unnerving when you look real closely there, right? If you take a step away and you're looking from a distance at this Browns offensive line, there's nothing to worry about. You have a first round pick at left tackle, you have an all-pro at right tackle, you have 2 all-pro guards, and you have a pretty good center. And if you're looking at it from a distance, it's fine. But then you start to look closer and get the microscope in. And then you notice that that left tackle, who's a first round pick, been up and down, not necessarily been an all pro or Pro Bowl level player. He's just been kind of like good enough. Then you look at that left guard and Joe Bitonio. You're like, yeah, he's all pro Joe Bitonio, but he's starting to get up there in age. Like what? I think this is going to be his 10th year in the NFL, or at least close to his 10th year. He was drafted in 2014, so at least his 9th year in the league. That's pretty up there for a guard. And then you look at the center position. This is a dude who wasn't really that good before he got here and then played well, got a contract in like 10 games, but nothing to make you feel really confident. You look at Wyatt Teller and you go, yeah, that 2020 season was great, but then like, you know, there's some other things that could go wrong there. And then you look at right tackle and you go, well, you know, yeah, Jack Conklin sounds great, but like, what's Jack Conklin been like recently? There's reason to be concerned. I'm not saying there's reason to hit the panic button or anything like that. But what I am saying is, look, from a distance, this offensive line looks like there's nothing to worry about. But like many things, when you look closely, there's a little bit more there that needs to be evaluated than what meets the surface. And that's why I'm saying with the offensive line in general, but especially those 2 spots on the offensive line. Let's talk about my third thing that I think I'm a little bit concerned about on this team. That's Denzel Ward. Now, Denzel Ward is an interesting case because boy, oh boy, when he's on, he's great. But when he's not just bad, he's abysmal. Like, especially last year. Like, I'm going to read out some of his PFF grades from last year. He had a 40 in week 2, a 27 Pro Football Focus grade in week 3, and then a 86.7. That's an elite grade in week 4. And then back to a 42.3 in week 5. And then he popped back up in what, week 14, he had a 41.3 against Cincinnati, then popped up with the 90. This has kind of been what Denzel Ward has been and what he probably is at this point. He's a guy who has potential to be an elite corner. And some years he gives you more elite play than not. But what he's always going to give you is an inconsistent body of work, and not just slightly inconsistent. Like, he's done this throughout his career, by the way, too. If you look at, like, just, I'm looking at 2019 right now, a 29 Pro Football Focus grade for week 1, and then jumps up to an 80 in week 8 once he returns. And then he just keeps having these like vicious ups and downs where he looks like the best corner in the world, and in 1 week he just gets toasted. Like, he is kind of inconsistent. And what I worry about is I've seen over the last 3 years, these bad habits pile up on this defense. And the biggest culprit of all of them that is still on the active roster of this team was Denzel Ward. Like, you talk about guys who have built up bad habits on this defense. Yeah, there's a couple guys. JOK has built up some bad habits playing for Joe Woods the last few years. John Johnson built up a ton of them, but he's not here anymore. But Denzel Ward, he's at the top of that list. He built up a lot of bad habits over the last 3 years. And as much as I would love to believe that Jim Schwartz is going to come in here and he's going to become a completely different player, I just don't think that's realistic. I think he's going to still make some of those big mistakes. And I worry that in a defense that allows you to be a man more often, that allows you to take your own responsibility more often, a lot of us are thinking about college football Denzel Ward, who was amazing in man and didn't have any of these bad habits that he built up in the NFL. But NFL Denzel Ward is a little different. He might take some bad chances. He might try to hop some routes. And that's what I'm worried about. In Denzel Ward, like, if my concerns about the defense and how many times I've said bad habits over the last 2 months have registered to anybody watching these videos, like, Denzel Ward is like the main part of what I'm talking about when I'm worried about these bad habits. It got so bad last year that he couldn't functionally run cover 2. Like, I'm dead serious. He couldn't functionally run cover 2. That's how bad the habits got. He just couldn't do it. Cover 2. Like, we could blame Joe Woods all we want. I think for some of these guys, especially in the secondary, that have gotten a little bit of a pass because of Joe Woods, these things weren't all Joe Woods. Your inability to run cover 2 last year was not on Joe Woods. That's on you. Like, I don't care who the coach is. You should be able to run cover 2. They couldn't do it between him and John Johnson. That's not just on Joe Woods. It's on both of those guys, right? And it's not on one of them specifically. It's on both of them. He's getting paid a ton of money. I don't know how they can get out that contract, but he's also somebody who, on top of his inconsistency when he is playing, has been inconsistent when it comes to, is he going to be able to play? Now, he doesn't miss as much time as many people think. I think sometimes people confuse the weeks that Denzel Ward is on the field but just isn't making plays with, like, him not being out there. He hasn't missed that many games. But if you could define Denzel Ward with any name, it's very inconsistent. And at this point of his career, he's young enough to where you can believe he could get better. But, like, the reality is he's old enough to where he should have fixed these things if he was going to fix them. I think he's just an inconsistent corner. And I worry about what happens when you put a very inconsistent corner in man consistently. Like, how much are we going to be able to trust that? That's a real question. It might burn us a couple of times. But that's my thoughts on the 3 players or the 3 areas of this team that kind of concern me. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.